Welcome to the second to last episode of our series, looking at why Christians believe Christianity to be true. Today we're going to ask a question many people never think to ask. But first, what we've covered thus far is why Christians believe there is a God who has revealed himself through history so he can be known as good, as recorded in the Bible, which is a book with the divine hand of God on it, both pointing toward and then telling us about Jesus, who made some truly crazy claims, unless they're true. But there's a question that's been missed, and it's this: did Jesus die for the right thing? Because if he didn't, this whole conversation might be a waste of time. You see, the principal reason he came was to deal with the problem of sin, which is that selfish gene in our DNA, or more specifically in our hearts. But is that really our greatest problem as humans, or might it be something else? You see, if you're sick and I am a doctor and I give you the wrong medicine, I might not only fail to fix your sickness, I might accidentally hurt you or even kill you. So correctly diagnosing what the real problem on our planet is important. And that's what we're looking at today. Can human beings fix human beings' problems? Or might we actually need God's help because there's a spiritual dynamic to life and the real problem is in our hearts?
I think the biggest problem on our planet is that we've walked away from God's design for mankind.
People's selfish desires to be, the best or have everything or be and consider other people. And
there's so many problems that we humans can't fix the world by ourselves. We're just brought up in such a broken world, really.
We all have this nature inside of us that wants to almost, elevate ourselves to be like gods, to be like many gods.
People are so fixated on themselves. I don't believe we can fix the world without God.
If we took God out of the picture, human beings would think that they'd be able to fix all of the world's problems. But I don't know how long that would last for.
It's like parents' rules. They don't do it because they don't want us to have fun, but it's because they know that what's good and what's bad and what can harm us. So God doesn't do it because he doesn't want us to live a life. He wants it to protect us, and he shows his love through that.
Because when it comes from people, my right and wrong is, completely different to other people's right and wrong. And I think it's right to leave the toilet seat up, but time thinks that's really wrong. So I think human standards of right and wrong is forever changing.
John Lennon of the Beatles had a belief that many people in our world today share. He believed our basic human nature was capable of sustained good, and that we could make good triumph by ourselves. And he didn't think religion was all that important. He said, "We all have Hitler in us, but we also have love and peace, so why not give peace a chance for once?" The question is, how much of the good and the bad is in us, and which has the greater power? Until a couple of hundred years ago, we in the West believed human nature was essentially corrupt. This idea came from our Christian heritage. For example, children will naturally grow up to be selfish or lazy and do no chores around the house, unless we train and encourage them to be selfless and to help others. But then a mid-18th century Swiss-born philosopher named Jean-Jacques Rousseau challenged this idea. He made the suggestion that human nature was at its best before we train our children. He suggested that people are naturally loving, virtuous and selfless. It is society with its artificial rules and conventions that makes them envious, hypocritical and competitive. The solution was therefore to overthrow those in power who control the institutions of government and religion which have corrupted us, so we can be free of the rules and become good. A few decades later, in 1793, the French Revolution put these ideas into practice, and it didn't go well. The French Revolution was later named the Reign of Terror. It started with the killing of tens of thousands of the monarchy, government and church leaders. They then killed hundreds of thousands because not everybody agreed with their power grab. But then they killed millions because their society descended into chaos. So they looked for a saviour, resulting in Napoleon Bonaparte, their dictator, who restored order and led them to war. You see, when God was removed from the picture and human nature was assumed to be good, it didn't make things better. So is the problem on our planet really the structures and institutions of our societies? It's the schools, it's our parents, it's the government. Or like the Bible says, could it be the sin and selfishness in our hearts?
Karl Marx, whose ideas got communism started in Russia,
was influenced by the German philosopher George Hegel, who was also well respected by Hitler. He too believed that humans were good by nature. To Marx, morality was nothing more than an idea used by the rich and powerful. It wasn't actually real, nothing was actually right or wrong. So Karl Marx said, I can give you a better life. The problem is the educated and wealthy who have power. You give me the power and I'll overthrow them and put you in their place. The result was communism, which was responsible for the murder of well over 90 million people in the 20th century alone. So what went wrong, noting that his goal was to help people? Well, many things went wrong clearly, but amongst them, at the core, there was a denial of God and a denial of human nature. You see, if we're just advanced animals who exist as accidents of evolutionary chance, why can't the end justify the means if you're trying to do good? Why can't we just kill a few people or a few million if it can enable a better outcome for ourselves and our planet? You see, if there's no God, what's wrong with doing evil? Another reason it ended badly was because Marx assumed that if you got rid of the rich oppressors and put some poor working class people in their place, that the poor would somehow be better and good. But they weren't. Like those before them, they used their power for their own benefit. And because they'd rejected the idea of God, well, why not kill a few people if it can help us achieve our goals? And this led to the killing of tens of millions of their own countrymen, sometimes by starving whole provinces. And what they let themselves do in the torture chambers doesn't bear mention. You're probably aware that fascism, like with Adolf Hitler in Germany, was no different. While they had some different starting ideas, the results were the same, because the values were the same. If there's no God, there's no real right or wrong. Power is therefore what counts, not love, because it's about survival of the fittest, right? And because people are just advanced animals, well, human life has no real value. So the end can justify the means, which in practice means that those in power give themselves permission to do anything. You see, if you're sick and I misdiagnose your sickness and give you the wrong medicine, like freedom in the name of overthrowing the rules, I might not only fail to cure you, I might set up a scenario that kills you. A Russian novelist of the time, Fyodor Dostoevsky, pointed out the core of this problem with a question: can man be good without God? Now, to be clear, he wasn't saying that people who don't believe in God can't do good things. His point was more that if we reject the idea of God, our basis for defining the words good and bad is gone. It becomes nothing more than a matter of opinion. For example, a teacher tells some students the rules of a game and lets them play, rewarding those who keep the rules while making those who don't sit on the sideline. That's like having a God above us defining the moral rules for life, based on what's loving and good with the big picture in mind. But imagine there's no teacher. The students first argue about who's the boss, and then about what game to play, and then about what the rules are. The dominant ones take charge, and they then dictate the rules, sometimes to suit themselves, while those who disagree go off to play their own game with their own rules. This is how it is without God. There's no actual definition of right and wrong. There's no actual purpose or meaning to life. We actually get to make everything up. And therefore, those who take the power get to dictate their version of the rules to those they control. So, can we be good without God? His point is no, because we're left with no basis for even defining what the word good means. So, what's the alternative view? Well, it's the idea that God does exist and human nature is not actually good. Lord of the Flies is a 1954 novel about a group of British boys stuck on a deserted island. They tried to govern themselves, but with disastrous consequences, involving tribalism and death. And it dug at the question, is human nature good? To which the answer is no. And this is the view the Bible presents. To explain the Bible's view, the creation started with humans created into a perfect world. We were created really different to the animals, and we were given free will, because free will is needed for there to be love. We were then given the job of ruling over the earth to care for it, And these ideas make sense because we are majorly different to the animals. And we're the only species anywhere near capable of actually managing large-scale things. And we're all convinced we have free will, which enables love and rational thought. The problem came when those first humans chose to mistrust and disobey God, allowing pride and selfishness into their hearts. These actions broke not only our relationship with God, who is perfect, but also with each other and our planet. The early chapters of the Bible then give a selection of historical accounts, purposed to show how our choices as humans, as they became worse, created greater levels of inequality and suffering across the planet. So what's the solution to our wrongdoing and its mess? How about, instead of trying to fix everything ourselves, because history's already shown we'll fail, we humble ourselves and turn to the one who made us to ask him? This is the alternative approach. The Bible tells us that God is loving and good. He's patient and willing to give mercy if we're willing to come to him. And this is why he came to visit earth in Jesus, to show us what he's like, while also dying as one who is innocent to take the punishment for sin we deserved. This enabled our forgiveness and restoration if we would turn to him to ask that forgiveness and follow his ways. And it's an explanation that makes sense of a lot of things. For some more examples of things that make sense, I really can't explain all the details of these here, but they might spark some thoughts for you. The Christian view also makes sense of our inner longings, hopes and dreams, which it affirms as being reflective of something that's truly real, because God created us for more. Our inner longings and hopes aren't just imaginary in the illusion that is our consciousness if there is no God. Belief in a good God also affirms that we really do have free will or volition. The alternative being that if there is no God, our imagined choices are really just chemical reactions in our brain, predetermined by a combination of our DNA, our prior experiences and our environments. And if free will is real, which makes sense because we're all quite convinced it is, not only does rationality then make sense, but we can also then discern beauty, and we can make moral choices, and we can choose to love. All of these things begin to make sense. They're not just pre-programmed chemical reactions due to DNA and environment. And we've already covered that if there's a God, it means right and wrong actually exist. So child abuse actually is wrong and always will be. It's not just a cultural opinion. And if the Christian God exists, there'll also be real justice for those who seem to get away with doing terrible things in this life. And there's more. Because the problem with our planet, according to the Bible, isn't in our DNA, combined with our past experiences and environments. Christianity says we're living spiritual beings with free will or volition. And the problem is in the selfishness of our hearts. And if we could deal with that, well, isn't that the real source of the world's problems? And fixing what's in our hearts is exactly what Jesus Christ came to do. You see, Christianity actually makes sense of a whole lot of things that we all instinctively believe to be true and real. Or we want to believe that they're real, because they're part of our everyday experience. And these are reasons Christians believe Christianity to be true. In our next and final episode, we're going to look at what I suggest is the main reason Christians believe Christianity to be true. And I saved it till last deliberately. And it is the experience of this faith. Because the most compelling evidence for this faith is that it works.